Biology students. Um, Today is Saturday, April the 18th. This is the first lecture for the week of April the 20th to the 27th. We've got two more. We got 1 week this week, and then we got one more week of lectures, and then we're going to have a final exam. So the final exam is going to be 2 weeks from April the 20th for the Monday and Campbell County students. And it's going to be 2 weeks from April the 21st for the Tuesday night students. Today I'm going to start off with chapter number 15, Life of the Mesozoic Era. One thing you want to keep in your mind is the difference between an era and a period. A lot of people, some people got that wrong in the lab. They're getting them confused. There's three eras: Paleozoic era, which we finished 542 million years ago to 245 million years ago. The Mesozoic era, from 245 million years ago to 65 million years ago. And the Cenozoic era, from 65 million years ago till now. Periods are smaller than eras. In other words, an era contains numerous periods. The Paleozoic era is the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Mississippian, Pennsylvanian, and Permian period, from oldest to youngest. The Mesozoic era contains three periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. The Cenozoic era, we're going to learn later on, contains the Tertiary period and the Quaternary period, just two periods. We're, however, working now on the Mesozoic era. So, the Mesozoic era is often called the Age of the Dinosaurs. The dinosaurs, you need to remember, appeared during the Triassic period and they died out at the end of the Cretaceous. Another way of putting it is the dinosaurs did not survive into the Cenozoic era. If you find sedimentary rocks that are younger than 65 million years old, there you will not find a single dinosaur bone. The dinosaurs were wiped out off the face of the earth, became extinct 65 million years ago. The previous chapter, chapter 14, focused on the geology of the Mesozoic era. Now we're going to focus on the biology of the Mesozoic era, life during the Mesozoic era. There's a variety of different things that you want to remember for any historical geology class. And the first thing you want to know is dinosaurs were the dominant land vertebrates. They dominated during the Mesozoic era. The mammals first appeared on the planet during the Triassic period, the first period of the Mesozoic. And we'll take a look and see what those mammals look like, those early mammals. However, it's important to mention that during the entire Mesozoic era, mammals remained relatively small. There were only 3 or 4 different kinds of mammals. Mammals lived in fear in a world dominated by dinosaurs. Most mammals lived in tunnels that they dug under the ground. And they slept there in those tunnels during the day because they couldn't go out during the day. They would be hunted by dinosaurs. And they went out at night and hunted for little insects or lizards or anything that they could capture. And we'll talk about them later on. We haven't really talked about birds yet because birds did not appear into the Jurassic period of the Mesozoic era. They are the last of the vertebrates to appear on planet Earth. The first to appear were the fish, followed by the amphibians, followed by the reptiles, followed by the dinosaurs, followed by the mammals. And the last vertebrates to appear on planet Earth were the birds during the Jurassic. And they evolved from what we call theropod dinosaurs. We're going to talk about what theropod dinosaurs are later on. But the birds evolved from the dinosaurs and appeared on the planet during the Jurassic period. Other things you want to know about Mesozoic life is that the angiosperms, this is a type of plant that dominates planet Earth today, appeared during the Mesozoic era. That doesn't mean they dominated during the Mesozoic era. That just means they appeared during the Mesozoic era. During the Mesozoic era, gymnosperms dominated the planet, especially the fern plants. Ferns are plants that you might recall from the previous lecture. Let's take a look at ferns. Are seedless, vascular plants. And ferns are one of the favorite foods of the dinosaurs. Fern plants, you also want to remember, do not reproduce by seeds. Instead, they use spores. So, angiosperm plants are plants that have one of the following characteristics. First of all, angiosperms use the animal and insect kingdom to spread their seed. Angiosperms are sexual creatures. All plants are sexual creatures. And they have one of the following characteristics. They either have flowers, fruits, nuts, or they have they're grasses, grass, like grass on your lawn. The first flowers to appear on planet Earth appeared during the Jurassic period. So what's the most ancient type of flower on planet Earth? It's the magnolia. You might have some magnolia trees in your yard. I have one in my yard. And this is what they look like. And this is an ingenious evolution for plants because flowers attract insects and hummingbirds. And the nectar, the sweet nectar, is transferred from flowers to other magnolia trees or other flowers. And that's how sexual reproduction occurs. The pollen gets onto the feet of the insects or the birds. Pollen is sperm. And it's brought to other flowers. And it mixes with the eggs in the flowers, which are in the stamen. And that makes a fertilized seed. And that's what we call angiosperms. So, there are 4 kinds of plants you might recall. You need to remember this for the test. We have the seedless non-vascular plants, which appeared first, followed by the seedless vascular plants, such as ferns, followed by gymnosperms, the first plants with seeds, things like pine cones. Pine trees are gymnosperms. And then we have our flowering plants, or the angiosperms, which reproduce by using the insect, animal, and bird kingdoms by attracting them using flowers, fruits, nuts, or pollen. And the first angiosperms are the First flowers are the magnolias. One thing we want to do before we move onwards and forwards is we want to compare angiosperm seeds versus gymnosperm seeds. Here's a picture here that might help you visualize it. On the left, you have a gymnosperm seed, and on the right, you have an angiosperm seed. The difference is that the angiosperm has this extra covering around the seed, and it also has two inner coverings. So some people call angiosperm seeds covered seeds. Now these extra coverings perform a role. They allow for the seed to have a higher chance of survival. If, for example, if animals step on these seeds, they have a higher chance of surviving. Gymnosperm seeds don't have that extra covering. Both of these have to be fertilized because plants are sexual creatures. So the pollen, which is sperm, has to be brought into contact with the egg to make a fertilized seed. Another thing that happened during the Mesozoic era is that gastropods and cephalopods and bivalves rebounded strongly after the end of the Permian mass extinction. You might recall that the greatest mass extinction in Earth history occurred 245 million years ago. Well, 95% of marine invertebrates were wiped out. The bivalves and gastropods and cephalopods were decimated, but they clung on. They did not die out. Bivalves are, most of you are getting them right during lab, look different than the brachiopods. But brachiopods, usually, you won't find them in Mesozoic and Cenozoic rocks that often. They're not as common. Brachiopods are much more common in Paleozoic rocks. In other words, the bivalves basically replaced the brachiopods during the Mesozoic and Cenozoic. You probably never heard of brachiopods before you took this class. They're still here, but they're endangered species in a world where their ecological niche they were replaced by bivalves. And we also are going to talk about what happened at the end of the Mesozoic. In other words, at the end of the Cretaceous period. 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs were wiped off the face of the earth. What happened to the dinosaurs? This is real interesting if you think about it, because if it wasn't for the dinosaurs becoming extinct, the mammals wouldn't have been able to evolve to dominate the planet, eventually leading to Homo sapiens, us. In other words, if the dinosaurs didn't die out 65 million years ago, it's very unlikely that humans would exist. We also talked about Gondwana breaking out in the previous chapter. We talked about Pangaea coming together 245 million years ago and then breaking up into the separate continents. We talked about the Atlantic Ocean forming. One of the most common types of cephalopods, phylum Mollusca, class Cephalopoda, are these creatures here. These are called belemnoids. Belemnoids are very, very common, especially during the Jurassic and Cretaceous. Are they benthic, planktonic, or nectonic? You should be able to answer that by now. They're swimming. What are they? They're nectonic. All cephalopods are nectonic. You might recall a fossil in your fossils lab that looked like this. Do you remember fossils that look like this? They kind of look like bullets. These are found in the inside of behemoths, kind of acting like a ballast for these creatures. They're inside of these cephalopods. These are very common Mesozoic fossils, the behemoths. Phylum Mollusca, class Cephalopoda. These are nectonic organisms. They did not survive into the Cenozoic era. We're also going to talk about these creatures. It's kind of hard to remember this, but I'm sure you could do it. You're smart people. Foraminifera. What are foraminifera? Well, think back to the different kingdoms of domain Eukarya. We have kingdom Animalia, the animals, kingdom Plantae, the plants, kingdom Fungi, the funguses, and kingdom Protozoa, the single-celled eukaryotes. These are protozoans. They're very, very small. In fact, these particular ones, you can barely see them with you can't see them with the naked eye. They're too small. But some of them are a little bit bigger, pea-sized. Some are small, even smaller than that, maybe just a millimeter across. They float in the oceans. So are they benthic, planktonic, or nectonic, ladies and gentlemen? Think about it. Are they benthic, planktonic, or nectonic? They float. They are planktonic. Let's take a look at some different foraminifera. This is what these tiny creatures look like. Here you can see a variety of different species. They have all these different chambers connected together. The animal lived inside of this. These became very common during the Mesozoic, and they're wonderful index fossils. They're wonderful for dating Mesozoic rocks. We're going to actually look at foraminifera fossils, and they're going to give us clues as to what happened to the dinosaurs, too. So keep that in your mind. Talk about them later. Foraminifera. Other types of plankton are shown here. These became very common. These are called the coccolithophores. Coccolithophores. The most common form of life on planet Earth are little tiny creatures like this. Things you might not even think about. In a gallon of water, you could have hundreds of thousands of these little creatures. What you're seeing here, these coccolithophores, they might live a day or two or a week, and these are their tests, Tests. This is what the little animal lived inside of the hard shell-like material, and when it dies, these tests fall like a rainfall onto the sea floor, making limestones if their tests are made of calcite, or making chert and flint if the tests are made of quartz. Let's talk about fish now. During the Paleozoic, we had 6 kinds of fish. The ostracoderms appeared first, then acanthodians, then placoderms. So go back to the previous chapter if you want the exact spelling of that. All 3 of those types of fish died out during the Paleozoic. The ostracoderms, well, I'll go ahead and spell it for you. The ostracoderms there was one of these in the lab. Some people mistakenly thought it was an arthropod. They died out at the end of the Devonian during the first mass extinction. Then the acanthodians, the first fish that had jaws, those spiny fish that you saw in the previous video, they died out in the Great Extinction 245 million years ago. Placoderms, those monster fish with bony armor around their head and jaws, died out at the end of the Paleozoic. These three lines of fish died out during the Paleozoic. Three lines of fish survived. The cartilaginous fish. Here's the class of sharks, by the way, right there. Then we have the ray fin fish, and then a few lobe fin fish. Those survive, all three types of fish survive today. Cartilaginous fish, ray fin fish, and lobe fin fish. Okay, this is kind of a short video, but I gotta let my dog in here and go to sleep, and I'll make another video for you tomorrow.